Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel Cakes by MK. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to securely stack a 3-tiered cake, and I've also got some bonus clips at the end to show you how I turn this cake into an Alice in Wonderland cake. Stacking a 3-tiered cake can look pretty tricky and intimidating, but with a few different techniques and the right tools, you'll have it stacked in no time. Also, if you're new to my channel, then please click the subscribe button below and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you're updated whenever I upload a new video. But apart from that, stay tuned and I hope you guys enjoy this video. Now, when it comes to making a tiered cake, there are a few things to keep in mind to making sure that your cake doesn't fall apart, because you really don't want that to happen. Now, I've thought about how to explain this. It is pretty tricky to explain, but if it doesn't make sense, then it's okay, because I'm going to walk you guys through the process step by step. Now, let's start from the bottom up. So what I've got here today is my bottom tier, which I've already pre-prepared. Now, this is a 8-inch 3-layer vanilla cake, which I have done in a striped buttercream. And if you're interested in how to achieve this striped buttercream look, then I'll post a link below to a tutorial which I have done on that, which you guys can go ahead and check out. Now, when it comes to the bottom tier of your cake, it's pretty much exactly the same as, you would do a normal single tiered cake. So in this case over here, I've just, decorated my cake right onto my cake board, and it's pretty much just a normal single tiered cake for now. And if you're not quite sure how to actually make a layer cake, then I also have another tutorial on that, which I'll post a link to below. Now, it gets more complicated when you move on to the higher tiers. Now, the key thing here is that you don't want the weight of your higher tiers to be too heavy for your bottom tier, that it kind of just causes it to sink in and just fall apart, which you really don't want. So to keep that from happening, what we've got CAKES dowels. So CAKES dowels are pretty much long, thin, straw-looking things, but they're really strong. So you can't use normal straws for this because they are not strong enough, but some people do use bubble tea straws. So those are the thicker straws which are a bit stronger, so those work fine as well. But these are CAKES dowels, and they're really, really strong. So I can't even really bend it. And this is what's going to provide this kind of structure within our cake to help keep all our tiers up. So there are two key types of dowels that you want to have in your cake. Now, first up is your central dowel, and then next is your supporting dowel. So I'm going to explain what both of those are. So first up is your central dowel. Now, your central dowel is your dowel that's going to go directly in the middle of your cake, and all of your cake tiers are going to fall into this dowel. So they're all going to be supported by this one dowel right in the middle. Now, what this helps to do is to make sure that your cakes don't shift around, especially when you're transporting it. So you kind of want to make sure that all your cake layers are connected somehow in the middle, so that, if you're driving or something, your layers aren't just going to kind of topple off, because they've got this nice strong dowel keeping them all together in the middle. However, this cake dowel does not provide kind of support to the bottom tiers because it's only in the middle. So what provides the support are these smaller dowels here. What you do with these dowels is you get a couple of them and you place them into the cake. So in this case over here, I've got an 8-inch cake and I'm having a 6-inch cake on top of that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to place about 5 dowels all around the central dowel. And then what will happen is my 6-inch cake is going to be sitting on a cake card. So I'm going to show you guys soon how to, what I'm going to do with this cake card. But basically, your 6-inch cake is going to be sitting on this cake card. And then this cake card with your 6-inch cake is what's going to then sit on top of these dowels. So again, these dowels are supporting this cake as opposed to your bottom cake supporting the 6-inch cake. So hopefully that made sense. But I'm going to go and walk you guys through it right now. Now, as I said earlier, your top tiers are going to have to sit on some cake cards so that the cake card can be what's sitting on your cake dowels. Now, what I've got here today is I've got a 6-inch cake card for my 6-inch tier, and then I've got a small little 4-inch cake card for my 4-inch tier. Now, what you want to make sure first is that you've cut out a little hole in the middle of your cake card. And the reason why you want that little hole there is because that's what your central dowel is going to go through. So as you can see, the hole that I've done at the moment is not big enough, so I need to make that a little bit bigger so that my cake dowel, my central cake dowel, can go in between it. Otherwise, when we go to stack our cake, it's not going to go through the central dowel. So the way you do that is really easy. So you just get a ruler, a pencil, and then you just find the center of your cake card. So my one's about there. And then what I'm going to do is just using a small sharp knife, you can even use a craft knife if you have one, is I'm just going to start making a cut around it in this shape of a circle. Alright, so I've done my little circle in the middle, and now I'm just going to make sure that my dowel fits through it. So it does, there we go. And now I'm just going to go ahead and make the hole in my smaller cake card a little bit bigger. So I've made that hole a little bit bigger and it fits through our central dowel now, which is great. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and start preparing the top tiers of our cake. Now this is where things get slightly different. So normally when you're preparing a cake, you might prepare it straight onto your cake board or your cake stand or something like that. In the case of these top tiers though, we're going to be preparing them straight onto our cake card. So this is kind of what's going to be like its little cake board, I guess you could say. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys how I put them onto the cake card. So what I like to do is, I'm just going to move this aside. I like to put my cake card onto something which is going to be easy for me to kind of move around, take in and out of the fridge, and then easy for me to also remove the cake from when I need to stack it on top of the cake. So I like to just use these acrylic boards. You can even use, other cake boards or anything flat that you've got at home. Now what I like to do is I just put the cake card onto the acrylic disc, and then what I do is simply just get some buttercream, put it onto the cake card in the same way that, you'd put it onto a cake board. Not using my turntable here, so it's a little bit hard. And then simply get your cake layer and then put it straight on there. Just make sure it's in the middle. And then after that, you pretty much just build your layer cake the same way that you'd build a normal layer cake. So the only difference is that it's sitting on a cake card, and that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and continue to build these layer cakes. So each of my tiers are going to be 3 layers each. So I've got 2 more little 4-inch layers and 2 more 6-inch layers. And I'm going to do also the striped buttercream effect on them as well. So I'm going to go ahead, get that all done, and then I'll be back once all the 3 cakes are ready, and then I'll walk you through the stacking process. So I've prepared all the cakes now and we're ready to go ahead and start stacking our cake. Now the other 2 tiers are currently in the fridge because you want to make sure that your tiers are really nice and cold before you start stacking them. And this is going to make the stacking process a whole lot easier and the cakes a lot easier to handle, so you're not getting like squished icing everywhere. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our central dowel in the middle of this bottom tier, which is our 8-inch 3-layer cake. So what you want to do is you just want to grab your central dowel, which is your big long dowel, and you want to just insert it into the middle of the cake, and that's pretty much it. So I just kind of like to eyeball it. So I make a little kind of mark first, and then just roughly see whether it's in the middle of the cake. You can even use a ruler for this if you're not quite confident to do it just like that. I can see that the middle is kind of about there. Okay, and then I'm pretty much just going to push it into the cake. All right, and then just make sure that it's nice and straight. All right, so that seems nice and straight. So now we can go ahead and add our support dowels next. So we're gonna have a 6-inch cake sitting on top of this 8-inch cake, and then a 4-inch cake on top of that one. And so it's quite a bit of weight. So I'm gonna go ahead and add about 4 dowels on the bottom tier of this cake, which is gonna act as our support system for our top tiers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab my dowel. I'm going to hold it up against the side of the cake and just kind of mark. I've got a knife here. You can use a craft knife, or you can even use a pen initially to mark it. And then I'm just making a little cut at the same height as the cake. And then what I'm going to do next is I'll just put this aside. And then I'm just going to grab a chopping board. Now these can be quite hard to cut, so I just like to use a small sharp knife. Some dowels are easier to cut, so you can just use scissors for it. It just depends on the brand that you're getting. These are really, really strong, so it's really hard to cut them with scissors, so I just use a little knife to kind of just cut it through. And then once that's cut out, the next thing I'm going to do is we're just going to cut 3 more dowels the same size as this one, and I'm going to use this one as a guide. So I'm just going to line it up first, just make a little cut. I'm just going to cut it out. Okay, and that's our 4 dowels done, and I'm going to go ahead and put them into the cake. Now what you want to keep in mind before you put these dowels into your cake is that your top tier is smaller than your bottom tier. So you don't want to put these too far out, otherwise you're going to be able to see them and your top tier won't be sitting on them. So I kind of just like to put it somewhere close to this dowel, but not too close either, because you want to make sure it provides good support. And there you go, I've got 4 really strong dowels in my cake now, and now I'm gonna go ahead and grab our next tier so we can put that one on. So the second tier is out of the fridge now, the icing is nice and firm, so it's gonna be really easy for us to handle. And now the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to first release this cake from this cake board here. And just remember that the cake is sitting on a cake card, so you wanna make sure that you're releasing the cake card with the cake. And then after that's done, we're pretty much just going to put it through the central dowel until it's sitting on top of this cake. Now to remove the cake from this acrylic cake board, I'm just going to get a long thin spatula and I'm just going to slide it across the bottom of the cake. And it may dent your buttercream a little bit, but that's okay because we're going to fix it up after. And it should just slide off like that. Now I'm just going to put this in the middle so I can show you guys. Now before I go ahead and put this tier on this tier, what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to grab some more buttercream and I'm just going to put it on top of this tier, and that's what's going to act as like a glue to make sure that this tier and that tier are stuck together. And again, you don't want to put this too far out because you don't want to be able to see it. And then you basically just get your tier. Because it's cold, I can put my hand up against it. And we're just gonna lift it up. I'm gonna hold it in my hand just because it's easier. And what you're gonna do is just feel the bottom of your cake board where the hole is. And you lift it up and just feel it until it drops into that hole. There we go. And then basically it will start falling itself. So as you can see, it is falling itself. But what you can do now is you can just use your hand to help push it down. And some of the buttercream will come up, but that's okay because we're going to fix it up later. And then once you're at the bottom, just let it go. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to push some of this buttercream down. This will all be covered up, so you don't need to worry about it. So now that that tier is nicely on, what we're going to do next is we're going to add our third tier on top. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and put more dowels into the second tier, which is going to be supporting our third tier. So because our top tier is just a small 4-inch cake, I'm just going to be putting in 2 dowels on either side of our support dowel. And I'm just going to be doing that exactly the same way. So I'm just going to grab a dowel. I'm just going to hold it up the side of the cake. And I'm just going to kind of make a mark where it is. And then I'm just going to use my knife again to cut out 2 dowels. And then I'm just going to insert the dowels. And these 2 dowels that I've just put in are being supported by the cake card, which the 6-inch cake is sitting on. So you just basically push it down until you can feel that it's touched the cake card on the bottom. And now we're pretty much done. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab our top tier and then we're going to put that one on top. So I've got the final tier out of the fridge now, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and release it from this acrylic cake board and then put it on top of this cake the exact same way that I did the second tier. And there it is, our 3 tiers are nicely assembled and it's really nice and structurally sound, so it's not going to fall apart. Now what I'm going to do next before I finish off is I'm just going to fill in the little gaps which you can see between the tiers. And the way that I'm going to do that is really easy. I've just got a piping bag here with some more Swiss meringue buttercream in it, and it's got a really small nozzle on it, a really small round nozzle on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and pipe some buttercream around the edges of the cake, and then I'm going to smooth it out with my cake scraper. This is also going to help secure the cakes together. And I'm just holding my cake scraper at a slight angle so that it's only scraping the bottom of the cake. And there you go. Now we've got 3 really beautiful tiers, all nicely stacked with no kind of, peeping holes anywhere. And you guys can go ahead and, smooth out the edges if you're not putting a drip on it. I'm not too fussed about it because I am going to be putting a drip on the cake. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this cake into the fridge for about an hour to, become really, really nice and cold. And then I'm going to go ahead and start adding my drip to the cake. So our cake is out of the fridge now. The buttercream is really nice and cold, so we can go ahead and add our chocolate drip to our cake. Now, if you're not quite sure how to add a chocolate drip to a cake or how to make a chocolate ganache for a drip cake, then I do have a more in-depth tutorial on this, which I'll post a link to below. So what I've got here is a dark chocolate ganache in a squeeze bottle. Now normally I like to just use a spoon when I add drips to my cakes, but it can be pretty tricky adding drips to a tiered cake because there's not much space for your spoon to kind of move around, so it's much easier with a squeeze bottle. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to do a test drip and just see whether my ganache is at the right consistency and whether I'm happy with the way it's dripping. So I can see that my ganache is still a little bit too warm because it's not setting quite nicely as it drips. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it for another 5 to 10 minutes and then we'll be back to do another test drip. So I've done a few test drips and now I'm happy with how it's dripping, so I'm going to go ahead now and drip the entire cake. Alright, and now I'm going to go ahead and just fill in all the gaps with more chocolate ganache. Alright, so our cake is covered in drips now. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop it into the fridge to set for a bit before we finish decorating. So our cake is out of the fridge now. The ganache has set really nice and well. I left it in there for a couple of hours and now we can continue decorating. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is if you take a look at my cake, I've got these really long, thin drips which are running down it, and all of the drips are kind of running down the entire cake, but I still don't have a pool of ganache at the bottom. So the way that you achieve that look is your ganache has to be a little bit thinner than normal, but not too thin that it's kind of just going to run down your cake and you're going to end up with all this ganache at the bottom. So that's why I had to do a few test strips to make sure the consistency was right. Now, what I've got here today for decorating is I've got some really cool Alice in Wonderland card toppers, which I got printed. And then I've also got some beautiful roses here, some macarons, and then I've also got a few sprinkles and some glitter dust, which I'm going to be decorating my cake with today. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just start by adding these Alice in Wonderland toppers all around the cake. I think I might start adding some flowers in next. Now, if you're not quite sure how to add fresh flowers to a cake, then I do have a more in-depth tutorial on this, which I'll post a link to below. So I've got all my roses in and now I'm going to go ahead and start adding the rest of the toppers. So I've got all the toppers and macarons and flowers in, and now I'm just going to go ahead and finish off with some glittery sprinkles and some glitter. And now I'm just sprinkling glitter all over the roses. And there we have it, our Alice in Wonderland cake is all done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to securely stack a 3-tiered cake, as well as the bonus clips at the end to show you guys how I turn this cake into an Alice in Wonderland cake. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this, and thanks again for watching Cakes by MK.